would say that people were invited to serve on the committee to represent the broader community and to try to have different sectors of the community represented in that regard. But that the whole group that you represent, if it's a group, and I don't see it as such, but maybe haven't participated in the information gathering and sharing that's gone on and heard the opinions and perspectives here. And so you might have to go back and consult with people, but typically what would happen in a situation like this where you have a kind of a public input process would be that you, as a representative of that group, are listening through those ears and eyes, but taking that information in and then making an informed decision recommendation based on that information and that dialogue in the group. So that I think the important word you said was preconceptions or prejudgments.
Right.
The hope is to set those aside. Okay. I mean, to have those be what brought you here as a representative of, like the auditorium users or whatever it is, but then to use that information, background, and then kind of filter the information through this, and then come to the decision that seems to make the most sense based on the information.
Okay. Thank you.
Fritz, I can't tell whether your pen is up as a question or not.
I'm saying that leads to the decision-making process, which I would hope would be working towards consensus rather than towards
I've got that right behind this document right here, so hopefully that will be the kind of the next step on the ground rules. So any other ground rule elements? I don't know quite how to frame that, but you come with your representation in your back pocket, but you are here as a active participant, listening and kind of filtering and deciding.
And you said set aside and remain open-minded. So I think that's what we need to do: is set aside our preconceived notions and be open-minded to what's presented, so that we can. I mean, the goal is to move the community forward, and that's, I think, going to take that. And unlike the legislature, we need to get something done.
So can we frame that
Unlike
as,
the legislature, that's all I have to offer.
Well,
as being open-minded and setting aside preconceptions?
that works for me. I'm not sure if that works for everyone. I think that should be checked.
Yep.
Any difficulties with that approach? Okay. So on the decision-making piece, the decision or the question was asked at the first meeting whether it would be kind of Robert's Rules of Orders, majority vote, minority vote, and or consensus. And I would like to see the group go towards consensus, and I'll tell you why. This process of passing a bond requires 60% of the community's vote, and that supermajority is very difficult. I mean, it's been something that school districts have, tried to advocate for a change in the legislature for a long time. But if this committee does a kind of a Robert's Rules of Order approach with the decision being made by 51% majority, the chance of being able to sell that to the broader community are going to be pretty tough. And so my suggestion would be that the group look at an approach of consensus decision making. And people may think consensus means another's point of view. And regardless of whether I prefer this decision, I support it because it was arrived at openly and fairly, and it is the best decision that we as a group can reach at this time. It's a little different from the other definitions of consensus. An approach to get to that includes, after discussing a topic, someone makes a written proposal, you don't write it down in advance, but I would help you write that down. And oops, a little slide there. And the facilitator asks everyone to vote for the proposal, and they vote 1, which could either be a hand held up or a finger held up. I mean, if they're totally supportive of the proposal as written, and 2, if they think the proposal needs some tweaking, but they would not prevent the proposal from moving forward in its current form. And then a 3, if they would not support the current proposal as written, kind of an over my dead body perspective. And if it's not 100% number 1 votes, if there are 2 votes, the facilitator then asks each number 2 voter, if in good faith you could have your concern with the current proposal addressed, that would allow you to move your vote to a 1, what would it be? What would it look like? And then the facilitator works to get the buy-in for the refined proposal. So it's not saying yay or nay. It's saying how do we tweak this? How do we make this work in a way that addresses the concerns of those who weren't fully in support? You do that with all the number 2 voters' concerns, and hopefully by then they've converted to number 1. In that process, the people who had a number 3 vote might have moved, so we do another check. Had they moved from a 3? Then we'd ask the same question. If they were still at 3, what in good faith would be needed on the current proposal to move your vote to a 2? So they're not going to say, I don't agree with it, and I'm not willing to have it pass. Then you get buy-in on the refined proposal. And you can also rework that again to see if it's more than it would take to get the person to go to a number 1 vote. At the same time, you're still getting everyone's buy-in. Okay? As we reframe that, does that still work? So it's basically a 1 document that you're working towards. If that's not possible, if you still have 1 or 2 people who are saying they're 3 and maybe a couple folks saying they're 2s, you would then move to a decision that we can't reach consensus, but that we would report out that this is the majority perspective. And I just use these numbers. I wasn't counting the number of members on the committee. But 14 of 17 participants voted in favor of this proposal, or 82% favorable vote, if you didn't want to include numbers of people. Then the minority is then given an opportunity to report on their perspective as part of the reporting out. So by doing that, you're using the wisdom of the group to try to improve the proposal, but you're not letting someone who can't move off of a 3 from keeping the progress from moving forward. As you look at that, how does it sound? Sounds good?
Run or vote?
Yes.
What's the consensus?
How many won?
That's good. How many won?
How many wants for this approach? Jim, is that a 5?
My question, okay, I've raised my hand. My question is, the end result, whatever we're going to vote on, is it, I'm looking at whatever it is, location, matching funds. It is a yes, no? I mean, is it a consensus thing? I'm just trying to think of what the possible outcomes are, what the possible decisions are.
So the specific questions in front of the committee.
Yeah, and I don't know whether this applies or not. And I'm not against it. I'm not against it. I'm just trying to see ourselves, not in a, maybe myself, in a position where you need a vote. I mean, a simple vote will take care of it.
Yeah.
How many are in favor? Everybody raise their hands. You're saying this only needs to occur when, or this is what we should do?
Well, if all of them are a 1, you don't go any further.
Don't go
It's just done.
further. That answers the question.
Yeah.
I answered mine.
Okay. So then you're supportive of this approach?
Yes.
Okay. So that's 100% for you. Okay. So that's the approach that will be used. Okay. So now, is there any other ground rule before we have our 10 minutes of public input time? Yeah, Molly?
Well, this isn't a ground rule question, but it is kind of hurts what Jim is saying. Let me just, it sounds to me that the charge from the school board, let me just state it, is to make a decision between a new or using the old building. Secondly, if we decide on new, to provide a preferred location. And third, how to use the state matching funds. Is that what everyone heard?
There was, the third one was state saying.
Okay. Where I see a problem and something that I don't feel like I signed up for was providing a location. I thought that was the school board's job. I thought we were deciding whether we were going to choose between rehabbing and picking this and seeing this new spot. And so where the consensus thing comes in is a whole nother can of worms on where that location is, which I don't know how all of you feel, but I felt like that had been established, or should have been established.
Well, and hopefully we can clarify where things are at with that at this point. And then seeing if there are concerns with that, to reopen the consideration rounds.
I've thought about that, but I either rationalized it away or thought about location impacts cost. And so it's cost matching funds, but in order to make the decision, one of the many things that make the decision is location because of where they are, because of what people's opinions are, I guess. So I find it necessary to know where it's going to be in order to make a decision about the cost. I don't know, is that?
Yeah, and that's where I see this, you could do a up or down vote if we were really just choosing between rehabbing and new, if we knew what the site was and we knew the costs of both of those particular projects. We add a whole nother level when it's our decision to give them preferred location.
Well, your recommendation or finding, decision, I guess it is. But I understand the question. It may just be that that's a question on the table that makes it hard to know whether this process will work, and I guess we can address it as we get there rather than try to parse it.
We know where one of them is.
Yeah.
Chris?
That's a fundamental question in my mind. I personally don't feel I can evaluate the options unless I know where it's going to be. And I would like to have a consensus of the group, how they feel about that.
So, yeah, and I think that's part of the conversation that's to happen. Yeah. Sue, anything else for the?
Just P.S. or an exclamation point on the end of that was what Katie mentioned earlier and what was referred to at our last meeting, that from my mind, we're looking at the program needs and selecting the best option for the program rather than selecting the best option and then fitting the program inside. And they are different things. And so all of these considerations about site, et cetera, I believe we need to keep in the forefront the needs of the program that was presented to us last time.
And I agree, and I think all those things do have bearing on process. I do kind of want to see if we can close down this piece before we invite the public 10-minute piece, because this is kind of the part of the broader conversation. That was it, kind of ready to come to. Okay. So this sounds like it's complete as far as we want to make it today. Okay. So then we want to have a 10-minute time for public input? Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Are there any questions at this point from the public? We don't have to take 10 minutes. We can, if not questions.
Were there some questions from last time from the public?
There were questions last time from the public. Some of them were provided directly information back to the people asking the question. We'd asked for information on how to contact people. Let's see if I can just find those.
Is it the one about cost of phasing in middle school? If the middle
No.
school is renovated?
Here it is. So these are the questions that came in on the cards at the last meeting. And I broke them down between the ones that came in after the middle school presentation and then after the architect's presentations. And the ones that came in, I'm sorry that's so small, but I'll just try to read them out loud. For the after the Morgan Middle School presentation, what information or stats can you show us that tell us we need a middle school for 900 students? And then the next one, do staff or faculty acknowledge that a total rehab of the current building plus new space could meet the anticipated needs? When the teachers say we make it work now and then ask for lots more space, how does the committee and the public decide what is appropriate, especially considering the cost and I think value of the historic building? Can remodel adapt to all needs? How many teachers attended meeting to modernize Morgan? And why not if they were really interested in the needs of students when other bonds have failed? Are tennis courts planned for the new school? Doesn't the high school also travel to practice and use other facilities for games and sports? And then after the architect's presentations, is the community aware of the term green sprawl? Green sprawl is building energy efficient structures on the edge of town, creating community costs that are greater than the energy saved by building green. Does putting the middle school and the high school and elementary school in the same area create a security problem, including a terrorist attack, single shooter, or natural disaster? Dean Lambert has expressed that Black Hall at CVU may not be available to Excel program next year. I don't think we need renderings, but photos, plans, specs for the schools that have been built in the last 3 to 5 years whose cost to build were compatible or comparable to the bond we're proposing. The community needs, wants to see pictures, not lists, like the description of number of classrooms of different types, gym space, etc. that was shown towards the end of the meeting last night. I think it would be a benefit to the student, staff, and community if environmental design features such as natural lighting, passive solar, on-site renewable energy generation were incorporated in Morgan Middle School remodel replacement. I hope many of the features would pay back their initial investment with utility savings over the life of the school. Is there support among the committee for these ideas? Could these features provide opportunities to enhance instruction? So I don't know if all those feel like questions that we would want to take time answering and responding to now, or some of those again have been responded to directly to the people when they were known. Any of those kind of raised questions that you all would want to have time spent on tonight?
I just hope these are the kind of questions we would get if we do some kind of survey, and that, we could address a lot more breadth of those kinds of questions. I don't know.
Chris?
In the announcement of the meeting in the paper that was on the third page of tonight's Daily Record, Ellensburg School District, it has meeting tomorrow, but on that it says, have your say. The Ellensburg School District encourages the public to attend strategic planning committee meetings. Questions and comments from the public are sometimes addressed at the meetings depending on time concerns. That does not, seems to me, responding to questions such as are here, written out from several weeks ago, is very difficult. Whereas if we have someone expressing a concern directly to us, such as right now, then
Right.
we can address those questions and make it part of our decision-making process. But for me, this is not very useful.
Yeah, and if you recall, we were at 10:15 last time, and to have tried to respond to questions that night would have been putting some of you maybe in a homicidal mood. I'm not sure, but it seemed like it. But I know, and we've incorporated that into the plan for the future.
Yeah. And I would suggest that in the notice of the meetings, instead of saying options from the public are sometimes addressed at the meetings depending on time concerns, that we say there will be time allotted to answering questions and address what we're really talking about, rather than routine notice, which is incorrect.
And with that decision, it wasn't incorrect when it was printed because the decision hadn't been reached by the committee to invest the time at the meeting until just tonight. So that could be
Right.
changed in the future.
This was the wrong date.
I see what you're saying, okay.
This says, this is in tonight's paper, saying that Wednesday, 6:30 to 8:30. I mean, that's
Well-
what the public, so I'm not surprised we don't have people here.
Right. And there was confusion about that, and we clarified that, and hopefully the future meetings will not have that confusion. Right?
You said that for those that gave their information, their questions have been answered. What are
Paul and I exchanged emails. He said some of them had been answered, but not all of them.
Can we find out what the response was to the ones that have been answered?
We can get the information to everyone. I think that's probably the easiest way to do it. My hope was to be able to answer questions that were from this committee for the past 2 weeks. And I tried to do that. A lot of times when you start taking these questions, you could be spending a lot of time on trying to answer them when, like green sprawl, I would have to go to the architects and say, well, what does that mean? Some of them I'm not sure how to answer with regards to a terrorist attack or a single shooter. The last bullet about environmental design, I talked to Jeff as I walked down the hall one day. And then you get sometimes where people, like they talk about, we don't want to see lists, we want to see renderings. When I've had people say, well, I really like the list over the rendering because I know what I'm going to get. And so sometimes it's really hard to answer some of these questions. Can we remodel to adapt to all the needs? Well, yeah, it's happened in other places where a remodel has done that. But there's all sorts of things that this group would have to consider with that. And so, certainly I'll get this information to you, and if there's any other needs. But I would like the questions to come from the people that are here.
It would be great if you could distribute that to the committee members, this list.
Mm-hmm. So, Helen, you're raising your hand there, I think?
Yeah. One question that has come to my mind is, do we build a building strictly for the education of middle school? Or do we keep in mind that the community has taken the auditorium as a very important place for all sorts of presentations, and it seems that there should be a decision whether that's important or how important is it. Does it have anything to do with Morgan Middle School education? And of course it certainly must have some influence on what happens in Morgan Middle School, but it perhaps is something to look into.
So in case people couldn't hear, Helen was asking about, is the intention for the school just to be for the education of the middle school students? The current auditorium here has been a community resource and has been a place for performances both by the high school students and by community theater. Would that continue to be a consideration in the design of the middle school, and to have that be something that the committee would have as a factor in the decision-making process?
Well, one thing we heard from the architects is that there would be a theater in the place. Did I not hear that right? there would be a theater remodel, or a different theater, I guess, in the modernization, and it would, also I heard that it would be included, because there was a question in my mind, in the matching funds, if it was either in a new location or either place. So whatever happened in the past, I assume the board would continue.
So the square footage of the auditorium would be?
I don't remember that exactly.
No, but it would be used in the matching fund. It would qualify for the matching fund,
That's
what you're saying.
that's what we heard, didn't we?
Right, that's what I understood.
What I heard is that it would be used for matching funds only if it's used for educational.
Only?
Yeah.
Not only for educational purposes, but only if it includes for educational
Yeah,
purposes.
that was different.
So it's more of a multi-purpose room is what I saw. That's what's.
In the architect.
And it seemed as though both Bassetti and ALCS were suggesting that one option in a theater space would be to have kind of fixed seating towards the front, and then have the back portion be space that could be used for day-to-day school needs, but also be expandable for the theater space. And I think some of the renderings that came back from ALCS that were shared with the committee, I got them on the laptop if you want to look at those, but included that space being kind of converted from cafeteria or multipurpose space to being for large community theater events. I'm seeing Brian and Sue.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to clarify in my mind, correct me if I'm wrong, the question was, are we considering the community needs of the auditorium? Not necessarily is the architect's renderings
Right.
going to include. And I mean, I think that the answer should be yes. I mean, because what school district in the world doesn't have community use as well into the school buildings? I mean, we use community schools, and they use them buildings after hours all the time, and that has to be a consideration of what the public will be using as well.
And it seems like the whole committee is in consensus, or is of a similar mind that whatever theater resource is available in the school, the middle school, would be both taking into consideration the community's use of it and the needs for the space for community and high school theater as well. Sue?
I just wanted to clarify that the uses of the auditorium, even as it exists now or in a future one, are part of educational programs and are part of basic education. So the music programs, for example, at both the middle and the level high school are considered educational. I mean, we have state-mandated classroom-based assessments. They're part of basic education of the arts. So I think it's really important for us all to keep that in mind and to share with people when we have conversations. The arts aren't like the optional thing that you throw in when you can. They are equally important and essential to the full, well-rounded education of children. And I don't know. End of sentence.
Well said.
So we've spent a little more than 10 minutes, but part of it was reviewing the questions from last time. Would it be appropriate then to kind of focus on the information from the last meeting and what questions it brought up for people? Okay. Thanks. I guess at this point then we can just kind of open the floor to the committee to say what's on your mind from your dialogues from the last meeting, and what questions haven't been answered from your email exchanges. What needs to be on the table? John?
I'm concerned about being too specific about the exact location of the new school if we do choose to go with new. In case after the bond passes, another opportunity becomes available, let's say land adjacent to the Valley View site may become available and there might be a better location. In the fact sheet that Paul shared with the committee the last couple of days, it talked about the location of the new school before the last bond was run, and it talks about the Valley View site or an adjacent site, something like that. And I think it offers a little bit of flexibility, not to be too specific, but to know that it's going to be in that general vicinity. And if we're too specific with the bond, then something else comes up that's better later. Our hands are tied. So, something might be less expensive or more appropriate. So I'm just concerned about that. I mean, I do understand that knowing where it's going is going to affect the cost of the facility and everything.
Well, when you say know when it's going, we all got this little map, right?
So this was, I've got it pulled up here, that ALCS provided right at the end on one of the slides, or one of the boards up here. And what it showed was, it's kind of hard to see here, but the new middle school going in the field south of Valley View, between Valley View and Capitol. I don't know whether the existing parking lot that's there is this footprint is the same. With this land having been purchased fairly recently, Paul, that would include parking overflow and 8 tennis courts. And then here's a softball field diamond proposed and a baseball field. And I can't tell whether this was something kind of as an overlay, whether it was kind of soccer field or what, I can't really tell. But so that was the proposal that ALCS is operating under. The other conversation I think that Paul had in that email was that this land to the north had been thought about or considered, but that wasn't for sale at a price that at this point, or when it was last considered, was within the assessed valuations.
Any other land available there?
To the southeast, you mean?
Well, not, there's, whenever you're taking a look at a site, whether you're going to build on, extend it down here and do a remodel, or put in a school at a different location, you have to do what's called due diligence. You have to bring in the geotechnical engineers, the civil engineers, all those individuals to come and take a look at that site. There's a creek running through this 6 acres right here underground. Well, you certainly wouldn't want to stick a building on top of that. You would want to do the same for this site over here. And you do it after the bond is passed, because you have the money then in order to do it. We know that where it's currently on this slide, where it says new middle school, that's a potential site. We also know that if we ended up deciding to build new and on the Valley View High School campus, we certainly would want to talk to the homeowners in this corner right there. That would certainly be something we would want to talk to. We also talked up in the north corner. We had originally felt that we were going to be able to make a purchase for 15 acres prior to the last bond. There were 2 co-owners on that. We did have it appraised. The school district can only pay the appraised price for any piece of property. The offer was made, and one of the owners backed out. And so, and we know that area to the top someday could be developed for housing. We also know that where the parking and overflow was scheduled, there were 24, I don't know what they call it, short plat lots or some type of lot. And we know that so the idea was to go ahead and purchase that site, because we know we would be eventually landlocked, especially if the site to the north was developed or any other sites across from the high school. There's about 13 acres across from the high school that could eventually be developed. And so the three sites we're looking at would be, one, where the new middle school was, the preferred, probably the preferred one. If we can't, if we're not able to work with the homeowners along Capitol Avenue and Finney, because obviously to back it away from Valley View would probably be a better option.
You mean to purchase this property
Right.
and then be able to have the middle school?
Right, and then the third option would be to put it in the back corner, right there, right in that area, for a new middle school.
Have you considered where the bus area is and possibly maybe relocating that somewhere else and?
Is that here, or is that what you're talking about?
Yes, yes, sir.
On this drawing, the one that has the middle school up along Third Avenue is extended through, and that's a cost factor. The third, which is the road that goes by the bus, continue that on this drawing, which was apparently done by ALSC, the school is located sort of facing Fenning, and the Third Avenue goes through.
The purpose was to punch a road for our bus access?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm confused on, and maybe Mr. Ferris can help, in the last bond issue that you guys are using this site plan and kind of identified it, there was also in your bond deal that you put out, there was the land acquisition budget for $1,425,000. So I kind of come back to the apples to apples. If we're comparing apples to apples, do we go ahead and throw that contingency item in as $1,425,000 for a probable site acquisition at this point, or do you want to keep it out?
I would have to look at the numbers, Doug, and be able to give a response to this whole committee as to exactly what it is that you're referring to.
Yeah, this was your bond prospectus that Hill International and ALSC put together in March of last year. And the other thing on the diagram that Mr. Glover's showed here, it doesn't show what the architects and the engineers' comments was on that, but it was the four negatives to doing that. In one, they were the cost of the extension of Third, which is an ordinance that the city has that you have to do. There was the area, the wetland. They were very concerned about that whole site being wet.
Yeah.
No, the whole way down through.
That's that dotted line. I'm sure.
Correct. And then what the unknown costs were to mediate that. And so what I'm trying to get a handle on is, okay, if that's the site, back when this site plan was done, there was the school board was very, very negative on it. And what's changed now to make that site better or less expensive? And again, if we're comparing, what are we comparing? Are we saying we're buying 19 acres for $1.4 million? Are we saying we're going to spend how much money on Third? How much money to address the soils? Those kind of things.
So if this space were considered,
Any of that on that whole site was deemed by ALSC and
It would be, regardless if it was on a site here or a site along this building somewhere, you would have to do your due diligence.
Correct.
You would have to put in, and nobody knows what those costs are.
Right.
Whether it's here or if it's somewhere else.
Correct. And so to keep in comparison, because that's one thing that you kept driving on Mom's group, is how do you compare them? We have an absolute, so do you put a plug number, which, that's what in the development game we do. We say, okay, we'll put this plug number in.
I think you heard from the architects last time and from the construction manager that there were things that they agreed on and there were things that they didn't agree. Right. And so to get an apples to apples, they tried to come as close as they could, but they didn't. But the city, ALSC, Hill, weren't able to get
No, and I
Exactly.
understand. So I was just wondering how the school, when we're comparing as a committee, the pros and cons, what number do we use to compare for the site? I mean, obviously a big number here is $1,425,000 for the site acquisition, and there's $820,000 for the off-site improvements. How do we compare that?
So that's the question you have. I'm not sure
Yeah.
there's an answer tonight, but
Yeah.
that's the question you have, is how to compare what the cost differences would be from.
Well, are we still needing to purchase that property, or has it already been purchased? Would it still need to be in the bond?
This
The
property,
land
this property is owned by the school district right now, is my understanding.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Back when this bond went out, was that the property that we were looking at purchasing? And now that we own it, does it need to be in the bond anymore?
Now, this came out the last bond where they had said to the public that they were putting it.
Yeah, I think probably what we need to take a look at is what's in the current numbers, not what was in the last bond. Because I think that'll be easier to take a look at.
Could I just add to that, Hill International sent us an email on May 3rd, which had 2 attachments to it, and I think Doug will see that that's been addressed in those 2 estimates, cost estimates that we asked for at the last meeting, the question that you're raising.
Those estimates have been, but the site hasn't, so how do we know how to assess those estimates and the cost?
Okay, I see what you're saying. He did help clarify that.
Yeah, he said it was a changing world, and so now that,
Very good.
but my question is that it's still not defined, and I guess I come back to what Molly said. Until the school board has their meeting, and they all get together and do whatever they do from the legal standpoint and decide on the site, what then should we put in to compare for a plug number for either a new site or the cost of development for those sites?
There's all sorts of things that can be taken into account. When you talk about, educational spaces, we've been in an educational space for the auditorium. We've taken a look at that. We see that with this building, we would have 1 gym, or with the new building, we'd have 3 courts. We see all sorts of things that aren't going to be exactly apples to apples. Now, the numbers you want to plug in for cost, sometimes they're going to change whether it's going to be for a remodel or for a building anew.
That's why we have contingencies, and so, but the land cost is a big one, Paul, and we don't know whether we're going to have it. So all I'm asking is, what number should we put in order to compare?
So how about we just list that as a question to be responded to as we move forward.
I kind of thought the LFC estimate did incorporate a land acquisition cost. I don't think it's line itemed in here, but I thought it was incorporated in their cost estimate.
Yeah. And that's, I think, kind of what Doug's saying, is if you don't know you need the land, should it be in there or not? What are the questions, or what are the thoughts, or?
I still have a problem with not knowing where that's going to be, even whether it's on that property or, and there's no reason that I can see that we can't, as the term plug it in somewhere and said, this is where we think it's going to go. Now, if that changes, there are methods, even after the bond passes, to change by getting together and having a hearing and outlining how those changes, why they have to be changed and so on, and those changes can be made, as I understand. So, we have been looking at this for a long time, not to look to the past, but it would seem to me that after several years of looking at this Morgan Middle School, we ought to be able to see, here is where we think it should go. Now, there's contingencies about land and so on and so forth, but we need, in my opinion, to know where it's going to be located. And if it's going to be on that property, how should we plan? Where do we think it's going to be? Is it going to be up above, where it's on one drawing, or where it's located here on the other drawing? Both of them are on that dotted line, which is the underground stream. So water is a problem. How big a problem is it? You certainly ought to know we built on that property.
I thought Paul addressed that a little bit when he said that there are engineering studies and, could you just rephrase that part? Because it's one of the things I've struggled with too.
One of the things to keep in
expensive
mind,
stuff.
when Valley View was built, it had issues with it because we didn't have a construction manager on that, for Valley View's construction. When the high school was built, we had a construction manager that we knew, and from all the engineers, that we needed to be able to bring in and raise that so that, because of the water issues that are in this valley, even if you were to build here, you would want to raise it in order to deal with the water issues that are in this valley. And so it's the civil engineers, the geotechs, all those individuals that come in and say, we're going to crop 40 wells, we're going to drill 40 wells in order to see what kind of water flow there might be during the summer. We're going to be able to mitigate any of the issues that might be of concern. Will there be a cost? Yeah, whether it's on this property or this property. We don't know what those issues are yet, and we won't know until after the bond's passed, so we can ask so that we can pay for those people to come in to do it.
So
And
you're
that
saying
makes it real tough, because people that want to know exactly where it's going to be, if the school district was to go out and purchase 20 acres and say the building's going to be on those 20 acres, everybody would say, oh, I know where it's going to be. But what we have said is that the school's going to be on this 57-acre campus. We know that we have preferred sites, but we have to do the due diligence to make sure that it would work, whether it's there or whether it's here.
So Paul, what I'm hearing you say is even though it's a preferred site, would it be, you think the school board then on the next, whether it's a remodel or if it is a new school, they would still budget in the $1,425,000?
I don't, again, that's for the last bond. I don't
Well,
know.
I mean, but we're comparing.
I said I would get you.
No, I know, but I'm just throwing that out for thought because we have to compare.
Yeah, and that was the question. You got it right there.
So Fritz, I mean, I'm hearing your concern that you want to be able to move forward with the ability to kind of gauge what the numbers would be based on a preferred site.
Yeah.
You'd like it to be a sure
I'd
site,
like to know,
the best that
I'd
can be
like to
done.
know the best guess, what's it gonna cost to mitigate the water situation, for example.
And that's probably not going to be known, as Paul's been saying, until the analysis is done after the bond's passed, and you'd have all those civil engineers and other folks
On what
doing their
basis
analysis.
are you saying that?
I'm sorry?
On what basis are you saying that it can't be done now? Why
We have to
can't
have
you
money to pay the people.
Well, it might be money well invested if we're deciding to invest $49 million or something to that effect. I know that before I invested my money, and that's what we're doing. From our point of view, we're being taxed at $20,000 net present value to build this school. I'd like to know where that money, what it's going to cost to mitigate it if it's going to be located there.
And one of the public's,
at least an estimate.
Right. One of the public's perception, and maybe Paul can help us with this, so we can all understand, the adage of we don't have the money until we get the bonds passed. A lot of people don't buy that argument because there was the money to buy the property across the street. And so if there's money to buy the property across the street for long-term planning, why isn't, and that was $230-some-odd thousand.
Put that on the board.
Why can't some of those same funds be used for engineering tests and due diligence ahead of time?
Then what if the bond doesn't pass?
Well, but it's still money spent. I mean, if it doesn't pass, it's a sunk cost like all of the other monies that were spent on the last three. It's a sunk cost.
Okay,
And
to answer your question, I hear three sites. And I hear that no matter what, there has to be hydrologists or whoever have to go in and make a decision, even if it's here. We all know you find all kinds of wild things. In addition to that, there might be money to buy that other, it seems like you're saying the preferred site would be that corner. That's a general area to me. I can't get overly excited about whether it's going to be in any one of the three places.
Except there's a cost factor.
But
And
the
that's what I
cost
get
factor,
at.
we don't know when it'll be plugged in, Fritz, I think.
But it can,
To the bottom.
estimates can be made.
I don't disagree with that.
That's what the contingencies
I don't
for
disagree
in
with
the
that.
project, is for those kinds of things. If the contingency should be large enough to cover that kind of.
There's contingencies also on Morgan Middle School and the construction of it. We don't know what we're gonna find there. And I suspect that those are a lot harder to visualize and appraise than the contingencies here, because we're aware of what the problems are here. And I think we're being irresponsible if we don't look at the water issue seriously. And where is the best place to put it to avoid having expensive water issues? And it seems to me we know there's a problem there and have known it. Therefore, let's address it and estimate what the cost will be and put the location where it minimizes that cost. And then I think we're in a better position to sell the new location to the rural community, if you will, and the retirees and the people in agriculture. Because we need to know what it's going to cost us.
Yeah, and I guess the reason I'm looking a little kind of stymied is that it sounds like you're asking for a level of assurance that would typically not be available prior to a bond passing. And your concern is that without that level of assurance, the bond may not pass.
That's exactly right.
And what I hear Superintendent Ferris saying is that it's very hard to do that and invest the dollars that it would take. I don't know, if there's analysis of how much money that is, but it's not like one of your questions is, can we find that out? And if it's possible, can we get that information in advance?
Look at this record.
Okay.
To complicate it just a little bit, if he needs that information about that site, in order to compare apples to apples, we need the same information about this site. So if we need that before we can move forward, that's an investment that we can't decide to make. We can just recommend that investment be made.
Mom's has made it.
But this group hasn't. Looking forward.
No, we have the information, is what I'm saying.
You've done the studies?
There was a lot of studies. We brought the structural engineers over with
Of
all.
both places?
No, for Morgan.
Okay.
Correct. We spent our money on Morgan.
You guys have drilled wells and everything to
No.
assess all
There
that?
wasn't a geotech study.
There wasn't a geotech study done. However, there was a structural study for the add-on. It goes right next door. The ditch is on the other side of the Plato, but we won't get into that.
No, the point is if we're going to recommend a study of a preferred site and we're going to compare apples to apples, we need two studies.
Absolutely.
And I don't know how the agricultural committee is going to feel about doing two studies.
Great. I agree.
And those geotech reports could be $20,000 to $30,000 at a minimum each.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of money, especially if you're looking at two sites.
And I think you indicated that in both architects' presentation, they have contingencies built in, which should handle any issue that might surface, so to speak.
Sue?
Would it be possible to include on our list of questions a little bit of a primer on how school districts obtain their funds and spend their funds in order to accommodate this request? Because I asked a ton of questions, as you all are getting feeling for, and I asked Mr. Walker a ton of questions because of conversations like this that I've had with people and attempting to understand is this possible, is this feasible, where do our funds come from? And I'm no expert. My little understanding that I have now is that would be very difficult for the district to do these studies up front, because as Laurel said, you got to have the money to pay the people to do the work, and that money comes from the capital bond construction process. Now, that's Sue's understanding, so it might be something that, in order to even make that recommendation, do we need a little more education and understanding about what we're asking for, or not? That's just
So specific to costs such as this, or do you want to know kind of how the school district gets funds for its teachers and building maintenance and that sort of thing, or are you talking specifically about something like that?
I can ask my husband for a trip to Europe, and he'll just look at me and say, yeah, right, how do we pay for that? So I want to know how realistic is it for us to ask the district to do expensive studies, which, as we've read in the manuals, et cetera, and have heard from the superintendent and from you, these are typically processes done post-bond. And I have a feeling there's a reason they say that, in that districts don't have the means to pay for them pre-bond. Of course, then if your bond doesn't pass, you're out all that money. Where did it come from? And the big question then is, well, where did you take it from in order to do this? So I totally get the need for a level of assurance about the thing and understanding as best as possible what we're going to get for our investment. But I want to know, when you say it's typically done post-bond, why? Can the district afford even? Does that make sense? Sometimes I don't make sense to myself.
Well, did it make sense to you that time?
I think so.
Very
You need to know if it makes sense.
No, I thought it made sense.
So what I'm writing down is, if money could be available for this, where would it come from?
And if we choose to, and if we recommend it, and the district chooses to spend it that way, is there a consequence to that? What will the district not be able to spend its money on if they choose to invest X number of dollars to do this study to make people feel more confident in the land issues?
Well, and what I worry about more is spending the money on two different studies when you know one won't be used.
Yeah.
Just for a comparison. It's enough money to do one geotech study rather than do two, knowing that one's not going to be used.
But you really can't just do one if you're going to compare apples to apples.
In advance.
Yeah, I sort of feel like we've got the cart before the horse here. I mean, there are a lot of other issues to debate about rebuild versus renovate before we decide where. I mean, and this is obviously a sticking point for us, so perhaps the answer will be a little clearer if we discuss many of the other issues that we have about that are going to impact, which we do.
So that's kind of a request to leave this for now.
Well, we can't solve it tonight.
Well, and I was the one who initially brought it up, and I would have to say I feel better about, at least we've talked about the property that we're talking about and the possibility of 3 or 4 different scenarios within that piece of property. I've just, been concerned that we could say it's going to be somewhere, trust us, and it could be
on the other side of town.
Yeah, right. So I'm willing to move on with this.
And Laurel, first, before Katie suggested the moving on, you both had your hands up. Are you willing? I don't know if they were on that topic or they were different.
Mine was the new kid on the block. Are there any other sites being considered, or is it this scenario being somewhere on this property, wherever the best case is, and the current, where Morgan sits currently? Is there any outliers that just since I'm new to the area am not aware of?
Paul, can you respond?
I think prior to the last bond, on the second bond,
Okay.
there was a committee that identified a number of sites, I think over 20.
Oh.
And I'll get that information to you, and I believe they narrowed it down to 3 sites, and Valley View was one of those sites.
Okay.
but I'll get that information to you so you can see that there are other sites. There's a lot of other sites, but it was narrowed down to 3.
Okay.
So we could believe then that we're now not just focused in on this, it could be, we're going back to on 2 where there's those other 3 sites to consider.
So I didn't hear that.
What I heard, the way that you answered her, she asked if this was the only site or if there was other sites out there that you were considering. And the way I understood what you said was, yes, there was a committee before and there's 3 other sites that are out there. So can we?
There's a lot of other sites that are
Correct.
available.
Okay, so
So
with
he's
that.
gonna get that to us.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
But
so we
you're
don't.
not considering that now.
no.
That you're just saying in the past that there was.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
She asked a question if there were other sites, and.
That you're considering now, I thought was her question.
Oh. I'm not aware of any. I mean, if someone, if.
That clarifies. I'm glad I asked that
Property
question.
owners north of Valley View said, hey, we would be willing to
Right.
sell.
Right.
But
Yeah,
you
we
just
would
lost
have
something.
one, it would move right up to number 1.
I think it's probably, just don't see.
To
If I
me,
could
that's a
just
site, that's a
interject-
location. Wherever you put it, wherever it's feasible, it's a site.
Right.
And I don't wanna hear different site, different, you know.
Matt, I just wanted to mention that there's issues with groundwater throughout the whole valley, and especially this section of the valley. I know that on the university campus too, there's high water tables during the summer, during irrigation season as well, and we have to deal with that with all of our projects over there as well. So there's a high water table in this valley, and there's going to be water issues just about anywhere in the city limits that we're going to have to deal with on any site.
So it sounds like, from what Paul was just saying, is that the area around Valley View is the only thing that's currently being thought about for a possible location for middle school. Potentially here, potentially here, potentially here, potentially here, but these kinds of things would take purchase of your land. These 2 would be on land the school district currently owns. And there haven't been conversations about this property. This property up here had been contemplated in the past and was not successfully purchased because of 1 or 2 owners wanting more than the assessed valuation. But something could change, and one of those might be preferred over the.
Right.
Is
that what you're saying? Is that what you're saying?
So I've been pretty quiet and I've listened to conversation and read all the emails. I happen to wait on a lot of people every day, so I get a chance to hear what other community people, they say, oh, I see you're on the committee, and give me their opinion. How much time has been spent in thinking about buying the houses around Morgan and expanding this campus? Has it even been talked about?
Is that one of the questions that people
Oh, yeah.
ask
Most
you?
of the people that speak, they're, in their mind, part of this community is where the schools are, and they don't want to see us moving everything out of town. That's been the fight, Molly knows this from forever. That's why we're getting apartments upstairs in the buildings downtown. There's a pretty sizable population that want us to keep our town down and not sprawl like all other cities have. So anyway, I don't, I haven't been part of these conversations, but I know I'm hearing that a lot.
So the question then is, has thought been given to building or buying land around Morgan Middle School for either remodeled school here or newly built?
In order to kind of respond to that, one of the questions, I think, if you do a survey, is to ask the individuals, where would you prefer?
Well, and that's kind of where I was going with this. I think that's the next thing we have to do.
Because, and it ought to be, if you do a survey, it ought to be a quality survey, and not just who can hit the send button the most times. And so that's one of the things that I have thought about, whether you remodel or build new. Where's the site? What site would you prefer? Obviously, if you remodel, it's gonna be this one. If you build new, it could be this one. But that's a question that probably needs to be asked, and not just to the people that I talk to, because sometimes they might have the same opinion as me. But I think it's something that needs to be part of the survey.
Follow-up clarification, based upon what Leo said, and I've heard this exact same concern from people, but what you said earlier, the school district can only pay the assessed value?
The appraised value.
Appraised value. So every quarter-acre lot appraised value, if we were to look into this option, we would be paying the appraised value per that quarter-acre lot.
Yes.
For ease of discussion, $150,000 a quarter acre, $600,000 an acre.
Versus $1,425,000 for what's in the last bond. So there's trade-offs.
Yeah, well, if you've got properties, you have houses on those properties.
Depending on how many houses you buy.
Correct.
Yeah, $600,000 an acre is, and you bought 5 acres for how much?
237.5, I think that was.
Because it was under, okay.
Well, and also you'd have to consider the traffic flow through town. There's, public streets surrounding the Morgan Middle School site, and even if you purchase the properties around that, are you going to be having to close off some city streets to connect those, or are you going to be expecting the students to cross the streets?
Well, and will the city allow you to close the streets?
Right.
There's been some, when Safeway expanded, they closed off Sprague. But then when Albertsons wanted to do the same, the city said, no, we're not going to let you do that. You can close off there. So just because you have a concept of expanding doesn't mean that the city won't allow that to happen.
Are there other topics that people had questions about after the presentations last meeting? So a number of people have kind of in the email exchange had thoughts. Jamisha shared some. Doug, you made an offer about a trip over to Seattle to see schools. Do you want to talk about those issues that have been brought up via the email dialogue?
Well, I just had a suggestion. I don't know. It's a comparison chart. I was reading through the chapter 5 here, and I think you've all read my email. So basically what I'm saying, and the more I think of it, maybe it's a good idea to, we talked about this at the beginning of having subcommittees, and I don't know if this is workable, so I'm just going to say it, and if you want to shoot back, go ahead. But let's say you put 4 or 5 people, 2 different groups, and say, here's a chart of things, and they have them listed in here. I have to read this because I don't have it great of a memory. We have an idea about cost, but do we yet totally? I want to hear what some of these older plans were for Morgan Middle School with the board. They seem fairly reasonable, but they impact cost. So if you keep the 60s building and the 90s building up and you build a new building over here, what's the savings? It can make this go lopsided. But cost, modernization, new site, space. Okay, those 2 might be obvious. Environmental issues, we're talking about them. Vehicle accessibility, transportation. I have a concern about that. Down the road, money comes out of a different fund. What about movement of students? What impact does it have on parents? Whatever else. Preservation, safety, water, sewage, utilities, storage, energy costs, shared facilities, convenience, and there's more, all right? whatever variables we decide would go on the left-hand side of a column, and then just say, have a system to say, you know, modernization scores a 5 here, and, or maybe they're equal. And then I got to thinking, well, what if we did this? You might have a different, you might think an advantage is a disadvantage. That's why I thought it might not be a bad idea. Exercise. I hope it's not useless. That's what I need to hear. That we could sit there and say, there's advantages and disadvantages for us to consider. Yes.
There's a similar process we've used called a valuing process when we've analyzed projects. And this is at CW, my day job, which I'm not representing CW on this committee, but what we've done when we've been analyzing the design on a new facility is we write down these different factors on a board, and all the committee members get 5 green dots and 5 red dots, and the red are negatives and the greens are positives, and everyone goes about and they put the dots on certain things that they value or think are negatives, and then you tally them up, and that kind of helps the architects and engineers decide which way to design the facility. Now, I don't know if that's we're a little bit too early, you know, what we're being asked to do is kind of a little early for that, but that's the kind of process that's used quite often in the design of facilities, is the valuing process with all the constituents involved. It's analyzing all those things you were talking about.
And Jim, one of your questions was whether we do that as a group or as subcommittees as well.
Yeah, whoever is workable. I think in between now and the next meeting, 3 or 4 or 5 people, or whatever we are here, can get together and do that. I mean,
Well, and I think if we can determine those values and begin to work on them ourselves, we can use those same values for developing a survey to use in the community. So that it's not just our values, but we're getting input from the community about what their values are as well.
Yeah, it could be maybe a very important to not important kind of scale for them to pick one of those out of 5 on each of those criteria that you just mentioned, and then we can understand what's the community's values on this project. You know, what's the majority on that? I really like that idea because
I think
it's not
it gets
just
us thinking and it gets
community.
us involved. And from listening to you, I wouldn't think it would be a good idea to let me do it by myself, each one of us, do it and then pour it in or do it on a computer. That would be easy. I'd rather listen to people say, well, why do you think that? Because it might dispel.
But maybe that's something you do after you've done the initial one, and someone could say something that would. I think the idea of subcommittees is, although it's efficient, I don't think that's what the public needs right now. They need transparency. They need every one of us talking at this table and hearing the same thing at the exact same time.
But we discuss it here.
Right.
I'm not saying, no, the subcommittees, we talk as a committee as a whole, pretty transparent.
Right, but I think the idea of everyone taking this, whatever it is, and then discussing it as a whole, maybe a subcommittee makes the question.
Or incorporating it in the survey.
Would a possible starting point be just simply brainstorming a list of values that we can agree on?
Well, if you think you want to weigh in on it, let's not agree on it initially.
Right, because it might be a negative that we've heard people discuss, and we want to get feedback on the community as to, is that really a deal breaker?
So just to check in, so are you saying that you, Katie, your suggestion is that you do that now tonight, and Jim, you were talking about.
We won't know what they are until we do it.
Jim, you were talking about a subcommittee of people creating a proposed list of things to be evaluated or valued at the next meeting. Am I
I say
understanding?
we agree to what the variables are, the values are, and write them down and come back and rate them. And if you find that there's other things, tell us next meeting. just to give total involvement about our thought and understanding about the differences, and I'm assuming there are differences, of these two sites. I'm talking about the physical settings. And let's forget about the process of checking out, that's part of the process in my mind of doing whatever you call it, geotechnical studies. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, there's unanswered questions I hear here. When I listen to the architects, what did I hear for the modernization? One gym? Or not enough? What about, this theater's nicer here, even though it's older, I think. That's a value judgment. I don't know. What's a comparison of the theaters in these two studies? That seems to be important. I hear that. It is important to me. But I mean, I think to people. So things like that can be, you can rate them. If you tear them both down, you have a new theater in either place. I guess you would. What about this building? When I wrote it here, because you drove me to do this. And I went back again today to both sites. And I'm looking at the front of this building, and what's preservation? I can't see it, and I don't know where the new structure is going to be here. I can't remember what Lauren said. The new building outside the face. Yeah, and I'm saying, so what am I going to, and where do I enter this building? I'm told the north side, but we like the face of this building. And so, I need to sort that out, and I need your opinion, and I need to hear from it. Things like that, okay? That's why I think sometimes, where are we here? Are we on 15? So, one committee has 7, one committee has 8. That's a suggestion. I'm just trying to sort this out.
Sam?
Okay, I've been practicing what I will say. I disagree totally with Doug, but I respect Doug because we know where he stands. I am exact opposite. We need to build a new building. Is anybody else willing to say what they're going to do, or is everybody going to be a weenie? Do they not have an opinion because they don't have enough information? I think a lot of people here are just afraid to say something. And like I said, I'm 100% opposite of Doug, but at least I know where he stands. Does anybody else stand anywhere? Or do they not have enough information? I felt I got enough information when I walked around here and saw the boiler room and the stuff or the shop and the band all living on top of each other. And I went to school here 45 years ago and had some of the best times of my life here. But I don't think we can produce a 2012 product, even if we just start with the shell and get the whole thing and start over and be the best use of our money.
Thank you.
I was saying.
So, Sam's asking the question, do people want to respond to that question?
Yeah,
And I'm asking for a response, I guess, but gosh darn, guys, let's have some, I won't use the word balls here. Let's have some courage and say it. And Doug says it. He says it. Does anybody here doubt where Doug stands? Okay, some of the rest of you have some courage, and me have some courage too. Now I have to go to the bathroom. And if you don't really have a way you feel, say it. But gosh darn, do something.
Okay, but it's
okay, so I'll respond.
Or go around the table, you be the boss or whatever, or Joe, I don't care, but.
I wanted to come into this process with an absolutely open mind, and after hearing the presentations last week, or when the architects came, the big deal breaker for me was that I don't see how this site is going to be safe enough for children as a new middle school site without having better bus drop-off and parent drop-off areas. I just don't see how you can fit it on this site without closing streets and buying adjacent properties or giving up all of your athletic fields. And so, to me, that was kind of the deal breaker for me. I mean, I went in this open-minded, and I really enjoyed the old section of Morgan Middle School here, and would rather not see it torn down, and would rather see it renovated at some point for some use. But I don't see a middle school fitting on this site, and so that's the information I came away with after, and I enjoyed the Bassetti report. I think they do an excellent job, and I would like to see the old building stay, but I don't see the middle school here because of the safety thing. The transportation around this site, to me, that's the deal breaker.
Katie, looks like you want to respond to Sam's.
I don't know that I know exactly where I stand, but I feel a lot like Joanne. Last week, my logical side just kept saying, we need to reimagine Morgan Middle School as something else and save it. But it is hard to see how we're going to do a 21st century middle school here and have the outdoor space, the safety, all of those issues. I need to see more from Mom to let me see how we can do more than restore building and sacrifice some of the other issues that were raised by the staff and parents. And those are transportation safety issues, those are outdoor spaces, 1 gym versus 3 gyms. I don't know how we're going to get there.
And part of it, I think, is the information, like I think Paul said it as well, is he classified when he brought up the gyms. Well, we have 1 gym, we have 3 courts. Well, the real world is we have 1 gym with 2 courts, they have a gym and a half. And so, and part of it is this information. But, I really agree with Sam, and thank you very much. And I don't know how long everybody wants to kind of hash
tippy-toe.
Yeah, tippy-toe around things, and I don't know if the public wants people to tippy-toe. I've never been a tippy-toer, so. But I think we can come to a conclusion relatively fast. Might not be the conclusion I want, might not be the conclusion Sam wants. But at least we can come to a conclusion, and I don't know how much more tippy-toeing around we can do. I think we're all getting pretty versed on, the pros and cons from the architects. I think they pretty much spell it out as far as the pros and cons. And so I just throw that out there.
Is there anyone else who wants to respond to Sam's?
I think you put them on the spot. Make them respond. Everybody came down here and did their stuff, and if they say, I have no feelings, respect them for it. But I think everybody, you wanted to be on this committee, tell us what you're thinking.
1, 2, and 3.
Are you okay with that, everyone?
No, I agree. I think we should do it, and I'll go right after Katie, if that's okay.
I'm done, right?
No, you're not. If you feel like you're done, you're done.
But I mean, if it's 60% of me says new building or 40% says remodel or vice versa, say it, or say it, but come on, let's have some courage.
Okay, and I'm going to do like Joanne did, and I'm going to tell you what my deal breaker was. First, you need to understand I love that auditorium. Okay, I've spent, I can't tell you how many hundreds of hours, anywhere from 2 to 10, 6 to 7 days a week, to 60 to 70 days running, 2 to 3 times a year inside that auditorium. 10 years ago, I would have agreed with Doug 100%. In those ensuing 10 years, I've asked a lot of questions. And the deal breaker for me was 2 points. One, when the teachers came and they shared their passion for the kids and their needs that they couldn't be met in this facility as it is. And the architects convinced me, from my understanding, that the needs, even renovated, couldn't be met for what those program requirements are. And frankly, in a renovated Morgan, that 9,000 square feet goes down to 2,500 dedicated square feet. So do that to my beloved performance space, and I speak for many other people. I'll let it go, and I'll get emotional over it. I'll let it go, and we'll have something better, and we'll have something usable, and it won't look the same, and it won't have 1929 architecture, and it won't have the memories of a dozen years and 1,000 hours. But I'm with Sam, we need a new building. I'm done.
And I need to use the restroom.
I'm not waiting.
Go for me while you're there.
One of the reasons I'm pushing so hard on the location on the campus is because that's how sort of I visualized that Valley View High School new building. I mean, this is a way to put all of our educational activities in sort of one general campus. At the same time, half the voters, I guess it's 53% of the people that are going to vote on this live in the city. 47% or thereabouts live in the, as we say, the county or the unincorporated area. The vote in the last election sort of just the opposite of that. 53% or 54% of the people in the country voted, and 47 or 48% of the people in the city voted. In other words, we have a rural majority who are going to be voting on this, and I'd like to know how those people are, as the city grows, how are we going to get more people into this location and even function? And so what Katie says and what we just heard Sue say and Sam, I'm in line with that. After looking at this somewhat exhaustively, I just can't see the building putting that money into this facility, which is what's happened over the years is it's been thrown together, and we have now a hodgepodge of architecture and buildings, and it's crowded, and it's I don't see how it can be made a modern facility. That we need to look to that area around Morgan, around Valley View, and focus on that, in my opinion.
Thank you, Fritz. Doug, do you feel like you've said what you wanted to say, or do you want to say more?
Yeah, I think everybody here knows where I'm at, so I don't think I need to say that.
Okay. Leo?
Well, I think I'm kind of on the fence, really. I'm a builder's son. I'd rather see us build new. It makes better sense. But I'd also like to see something done for middle school children, not 10 years from now, but sooner than that. And so we have to convince the public that the best thing is to build a new school, and we have to convince the voters to vote at least 60% for that. So I think we've gotten a long ways, even tonight, in saying the location is on the campus. And I think that's the one part that was a little bit too gray, as far as I'm concerned. But I think if you're really trying to think way ahead, a new building makes better sense.
I have a philosophy. I have lots of philosophies, but I would love to see a new building created, but I came to this committee willing to put aside what I wanted to find out what the public wanted, because we've had failed bonds because the public just says we don't like what the bond is saying. And so from the first meeting on, I've been in support of public input. I will vote what the public wants me to vote, is what I am totally supportive. If they want a remodel here, then that's what they want me to do, because that's what's going to pass on the bond is what they want, not what I want. I know that this has been going on for far too long. We need something to work, and so even though I want a new school, something that's going to work. I would love to see the school get out from what $30,000+ on utility bills that they're paying just to keep this building going. The longer that we stay in this building without the bonds passing, the further we're throwing money down the drain. If we can do something that the school, the kids can get an education by having a more of a green building, by working with the utility, creating new ways of harvesting the environment's energies and the rainwater drop off. If that can be incorporated into a school program, that would be awesome. Because then they're learning and we're saving. So
And Brian, your thought about how to get a sense of the community's desires, it would be through a survey that would be broadly administered and broadly taken?
Absolutely.
Kevin?
Whoa.
Sam, I thought you already weighed in. I'm sorry.
You at least gave Doug a chance.
Sam, do you want to say anything else?
Yeah,
Sorry.
thank you. The only place you're safe when they see your picture in the paper on that committee is I haven't got accosted at a urinal yet. Anywhere else I go, whether you go buy something, everybody's got an opinion, and I think that is really neat of our community. But what I hear, they asked me, and I said what I saw when I took the tour, and my feeling on whether I'm building whether we build a building in a business or whatever, that renovation is really a fuzzy area. It's really fuzzy on hidden costs. I guess the architects were pretty sure on the $46 million that they could renovate the building. I don't like the site. They've already told us the site's too small for the state, what the state would like to see. Those are pros and cons. I mean, what I sat down and did is try to make a pro for each one, a pro for building new and a pro for the renovation and con, and I came up with more cons, and then the comments I got from people repeatedly was, I'll vote for it. I didn't vote for it last time, but you got to show me what we're going to get, whether that comes to the square footage space or some type of visual concept, which they said can change. I understood, I think, from the architects, that can change a little bit, but good golly, you don't just head to Kittitas without knowing where Kittitas is at. It's the same way with the building. You ought to know kind of what the building's going to look like besides the square footage. And one of the fellas said, I don't bale hay with my 1930s baler anymore and start with the tires and try and rebuild the baler. He says, eventually, I have to bite the bullet and get a better product if I want to produce the product for this day and age. And I just think that's where we're at now.
Thank you. I'm sorry I skipped by you.
Oh, well, been skipped by before, believe me.
And you've been traumatized.
I guess I want to apologize to Sam, first of all, because I've been thinking the same thoughts you have this whole time as far as wanting to speak my mind of what needs to be said. But with my position in this building as a teacher and representation, I felt it was better to bite my tongue. But since it's brought up, I think everybody knows where I stand on this as far as a new building is where we need to go. My vested interest, 15 years in this building, I've taught every year on the third floor. There are parts of this building that I will miss wholeheartedly. Being able to look out my window and see the entire valley is sometimes the only thing that gets me through the day without throwing a child out the window. I mean that in the best way. It keeps me sane. It keeps me sane. But when I look at
So I came to this committee with an open mind, being able to see, okay, there are good things about this building that we can save. But the bottom line is, you look at the cost, and when you get to $49 million or $50 million, $3 million one way or the other is really not that big of a deal. And for what you're getting, you're going to save $3 million, but not get everything that you need to provide the best education, to provide every student with the best education, rounded education, as far as the music, as far as the PE, those types of facilities. And I'm talking as a teacher, I'm talking as a coach. I've coached, the facilities we have here are inadequate. We are busing everywhere to do that. Building new, we provide everything that the kids need, educationally, physically, and emotionally, I think. So before I start whimpering like Sue, I don't. It is. It's something that needs to be done. So I'm definitely in favor of building new.
So I concur with the new. And just a brief history, because I am new to the area. Before we came, I actually was a teacher and taught in Utah, and had a classroom retrofitted to my needs as a biology teacher. And then, and it worked, but it wasn't great. I moved to North Carolina with my husband, and was hired in Raleigh at a school that had a science classroom built for a science classroom. And the difference was phenomenal in the ease of working the kids through the labs that we needed to do and the other things. I also am a minor in PE, and the deal breaker for me was hearing and seeing. I've been in a lot of schools, student teaching, interning. I have never seen a PE program work as phenomenally as the PE program here. I also have never seen teachers, and I may get emotional just because I'm still in awe. I've been in a lot of middle schools and chose high school because the middle school was always such a depressing place to be because the teachers were not the happiest because they had a hard and challenging place to be. But coming here to Morgan, we were really nervous moving a sixth grader. We were extremely nervous. She came to Camp Morgan, we met the staff, and I have been sold. And so I think, for me, I want to see not only our students benefiting by what the teachers can do, but I want to see these teachers in a facility that lets their creativity, their love for the students, their love for the subject, and their desire to serve each one of our children just shine. And I think that I wasn't convinced with as nice as the study's presentation was, I was in awe that they could do what they did. But there's no way we're going to get the land that we need to meet all of the needs of our children, both in physical activity as well as in the arts and the other in the other areas. And I will say, like Joanne, that I don't necessarily want to see the old portion of Morgan completely destroyed and disseminated. I would love it if we could creatively come up with another purpose for it, because I do appreciate the old. But I have to say that the teacher's presentation last week was all I needed to hear, especially after the tour. And because I'd been up to Kevin's classroom to check in on Taryn occasionally, but I hadn't been to the shop or the other shop/science classroom, and that's where you're seeing my own prejudices come in. But hearing the teachers' presentations of what they could do if they had the adequate facilities was all I needed, because I just have never seen a phenomenal staff, and if we can give them the space that they need to actually do what they're doing, I can't wait to see the end result. And it may not be in test scores, but it will be in self-esteem of our kids. It will be in the sense of place that our kids have, and those to me are just as equally important as a great math test.
So I'm on board with the new building as well, and my big deal breaker really is this footprint that this facility sits on. There's not enough real estate. Equally, I'm concerned about the Valley View site. I mean, I'm happy to be proven wrong, but looking at it, I don't know that there's enough real estate there. I think we're taking away from the Valley View elementary kids' play area, and I'm not sure where Morgan kids are supposed to have a track, if they're supposed to share here with the high school. I'd like to see us look at other sites as well. I know that complicates things, but I think they need more space than what's there.
Well, let's see, I learned after many years of being in public service that you wait until the very, very end and you listen to everything. And you try to stay completely open because you never know when that last person who walks into the room with a great idea and everyone's already made up their minds. And sometimes you lose some really good things. So I came, with an open mind, very concerned about the site for a new school, but more importantly, with a sense of wonder and amazement at what can be done in renovation, having done it myself for the building, but also it just so happened that I went to Roosevelt High School in Seattle, which was designed by the same architect that built this school. And I had my 40th high school reunion, and we went through a tour of the renovated Roosevelt High School, renovated by Bassetti. And it can happen. It really can happen. And I think there is perhaps a lack of imagination on what really can be done. I have a son who went to school back east, and his dorm room was the same room that Nathaniel Hawthorne studied in. And it had internet, and it had male and female bathrooms, and it had heat, and these things can happen. And I think that we're a throwaway society. We've said, oh, we need new. There's a tradition here. I mean, one of the things you said was you wanted your kids to have self-esteem and a sense of place. Well, that comes with being in the same place that your mom or your dad or somebody else went to school here, and that kind of pride that comes with that. And I think that is more important than another gym. And so I'm for renovation, but I'm also very glad to see that the site that has been chosen is at least in a pod or a group with the other schools, and would gladly, if the public says this is what they want to, I would march in that direction. But I really like the idea of going and looking at some schools, because I do think that amazing things can happen, and I'm not willing to let that die.
New school. I have a lot of reasons. I still think we need to discuss what we're doing here one way or another in order to let the community know that the reason for decisions. I've talking to a lot of people, I don't think many people, maybe two, that said modernization is what we want. But I'm looking at location, open space. Some of you mentioned that there's specific reasons that moved you one way or another. No phasing and dragging this on. We've had already 3 failed bonds. The long-range savings, it appears to me, and by the way, money is a factor. Money is a factor to the voters. I hear it. I've heard people say, I don't want to spend any money. They really come after you, by the way, when you ask them to pay. The shared facilities is major for me. That's why I asked the question, what are they? I know they're there. I think we all need to know what they actually are. I feel I'm better informed than I was when I started this. I see nothing wrong with renovating this site. It comes close, but it isn't better than, in my opinion, from what I heard from the architects. But the location, when I take a look at the open space, I take a look at the safety issue, I take a look at the shared facilities. I came here early this morning and watched the buses go along the side, 1, 2, 3, 4, they kept coming. I looked at the parents, double park, not really bad, it was fast, the kids ran out of the car.
Still, it is.
But, you know, but I see that, and then I got to thinking, what about that other place? And I listened to somebody who lives, I was in the dentist's office this morning, and I listened to this woman, you know, she's testified many times with all the other sites about the traffic and the improvements that the school district made, because they had a concern there about making left-hand turns. So transportation, I think, down the pike is even going to be more important. The idea of building a building to meet the needs of the teachers, we heard say, here's what we need. I thought Michelle did a pretty good job with that. I don't see it as clearly in the renovation. By the way, it is not a zero, for sure. They would do a lot of different things. Anyway, those are kind of my reasons, but I still would like to have the values. I still would like to have a chart, so we know what we're talking about, and the school board, if they decide to listen to our opinion, has something to sell to the community. I don't know if that's the right word, but for the voters and the citizens of the community.
Do you want to?
Sure. Couple of things that are very important to me. One of the things that when you talk to parents, what's their number one concern for their child? First one's always safety. When we built the high school, or when the high school was built, first off, there's 16 cameras in that high school. The administrative spaces look out into the commons. They can see down the hallways. They can see up on the second floor. The attendance window is looking out into the commons. We purposely put a TV screen right there in the attendance window so that everybody could see that the cameras are rolling and they could see where they're going. The gymnasiums were put right on the other side of the commons so that when students at lunch are done with lunch, they can go in and play basketball, and we would still be able to have supervision. When a teacher stands in a hallway, they can see completely up and down that hallway for safety reasons. That was the reason that was built. It's real important for me. This building, I have unhoused programs in this district. Our developmental preschool program, our Excel program, alternative program. We have our parent partnership program that we are currently renting space for. We have a community or at least our preschools, have asked for a curriculum library. Our homeschool parents have asked for a curriculum library so that they could have access to what we're teaching in our buildings. I have special ed. My therapists are in the hallways at the district office, along with three work study students, and our migrant, our interpreter, and 2 secretaries are in the halls at the district office. We can use this 35,000 square feet to house those programs, and there is a value to this building. Also, eventually, many years down the road, Lincoln may need to be replaced. And we would then have a site in the downtown area for a new elementary. We would then be able to transfer all of these programs out of here into Lincoln. So we would be able to keep this green space and be able to eventually use it as a Horn Elementary. So, you know, I'm for building new for those reasons.
Has there been anyone looking at whether the old historic part of Morgan would be adequate for an elementary school, such as the size of Lincoln?
No.
You know, I'm not saying tear down this new space if you can move these other programs in here right away, but if you're not necessarily tearing down the historic portion immediately and leaving that up to the designers of the future Lincoln, is it possible that it's more adequately sized for an elementary school than for a middle school? It's just a thought, just to throw out there.
I have that same thought.
Me too.
actually think that if it makes me sad to think of the historic nature of Morgan going away, but I think reimagining it as with a different function than middle school is a very good idea, and I don't know that that's our charge, but it's one that I think the community should take a look at.
So it's now 8:45. The kind of the next steps that we have talked about that could have been part of tonight would be creating survey questions for a community input process, and as well as just deciding what's on the topics for the next meeting. I think at least that next meeting topic should be part of the conversation in the last few minutes tonight. Sam, this is really helpful, and thank you for taking lunch.
I just want Doug to realize the respect everybody's had here, even though they've had it, because they've all been talking to you like, don't hate me for saying this, Doug, because I see his passion and I see Sue's, and well, it's contagious. If you didn't, I'm not a teacher or whatever, but it gets contagious that you really do care.
I think the thing is we have to provide something that will pass for the kids, and that's the main thing. And so, I don't know what the next step is, whether it's to then have the consensus on the new school after what we've heard tonight, and then move on to the criteria that the board outlined for a suggestion on location or how to use the state matching funds, or the survey. I'm bewildered on the survey. Is that something we're going to do, or do we vote on it, or will the survey make any difference to what the outcome of people's opinions are? And so, is the survey even necessary?
I think the survey is called a bond.
Yeah, I agree, but
Well, I think the survey would be very valuable to understand what the community's issues are exactly, not just, when they didn't pass the bond last time, was it that they felt that we had to renovate? Not necessarily. They felt that it was too much money. That's what I keep hearing from people. It was too much. And they didn't know what they were getting.
About what they were getting.
They didn't know what they were getting for the money. The thing I hear is there's too much. So finding out what's important and focusing on that and possibly revising the request for the bond to maybe match that better so that they feel it is. To me, it's not a slam dunk that they're saying we don't want to build new. It's just they didn't agree with the dollar amount and what they were getting.
Well, I've heard that. I've heard that from almost everybody. I also am hearing us say that we might make a suggestion about the match money, which brings this down. How much, I don't know. That's a discussion for the school board, I guess, to make a final decision. But I've heard people say use the whole 12, 15,000. Personally, I don't think that's the best idea. I think there should be some discretionary money because they don't get very much of it. And we're also hearing about, what might or might not happen in addition to the contingency that's built into it. But those two factors of laying this out, I think we know a little more now. I think we've probed a little deeper. You just have to market it a little better, and people know what they're getting, and it's cheaper. It's less cost.
And one of the things that I heard is that if it's the consensus of this committee for new, that is how to use the state match funds. That's what Mr. Fairbanks stated. So I think that inevitably every decision's up to the school board, but it's very important what this committee brings out as to what they think that those funds should go for. That's part of our charge.
And I think an option to consider is possibly phasing. And I don't mean build something inadequate. What I mean is if if there's a lot of disagreement in the community between billing for 700 and 900 students, that possibly in the bid, if there's bid alternates that build the extra classrooms that make up the difference between the 700 and the 900, and if the bids come in great, then you get a school that's for 900, and if they don't come in very favorable, you may only build for 750. I mean, I really think you should build for some expansion, you know. Maybe not to 900 immediately, but I mean, you know, something like that might bring the total bond cost down lower, but gives you the option, if the bids are favorable, to be able to build what you're looking for.
The only thing is then you've shot the credibility of the school again, because part of this whole, why we're here today is because of some tenacity of a lot of people. And that tenacity had to go on early stage with Mr. Ferris, and that is we're comparing apples to apples. So if you're going to now change the dynamics of a new school to say, okay, we're going to make it more affordable, then are you going to have, there's a lot of voters out there that love this school. Are you going to change the dynamics of what we've prepared as well for those voters?
There's still not enough land.
No.
Let's not get into that.
Yeah, no, I'm saying perception's reality.
But it also, but what I'm not saying not to build the other, you know, to meet the 900 students. What I'm saying is, it could be phased. So you have a property and a design that you could, if in the future, you could add on. If you're still in a tight space that won't fit now, you won't have that ability to add on to it later. It's just another possibility to bring the bond cost down and still give you the options to expand to 900 students in the future.
So a couple things I'm hearing are the potential to get public input on what were the reasons for lack of support in the past for bonds, and trying to then have the proposal address those concerns. Having there be options having the committee look at, is the investment of any state match towards drawing down the bond amount if the proposal is for a front end full payment or full bond, and having that consideration be topic for next meeting. And then kind of still on the table are kind of the values piece that Jim was talking about earlier.
I'd use the word justify our decision. A decision that perhaps was made tonight, but I think there needs to be some justifiers. I think we need to know that. And we need to make sure that we let the public know what the reasons why we've made our decision.
And I think that goes to the cost question, in the sense that, as you know, I don't like the apples to apples comparison, because I think we may have a poor quality apple here. And I would like to see us focus on making this as efficient and academically focused as possible in terms of what goes into that school. I don't know whether that means we discuss, well, do we really need 2 gyms, or things of this sort, rather than whether or not we need a new location. I think we know that cost, at least in the rural community and the retired people, is the major voter. And even though 54% of the people voted for this, we need 600 more voters for it. And that's the reality. They have to think that this is a good investment, and I'm willing to sacrifice my 401k money or my retirement money to support that, because it's a worthy cause. And as efficient as it can be.
And I think the community...
Hold on, just Sam.
Sorry.
She probably got more to contribute, but I had my hand up first. To a person, I never heard one say they wouldn't vote for it. They didn't have, they the issue was, they said, I won't just write them a blank check without knowing what I get. But not a person said I wouldn't vote for it if I thought it was justified. So we need to try, if we're going to do this, to help them see what they're going to get.
And along with having a survey, you would be giving them the opportunity to voice their opinion, and that in itself, if we went, or if we were able to take their opinions and within reason accommodate those opinions, the bond would sell itself, because they've already said, this is what we're willing to support. This is, as Jim said, this is what our values are. This is what we want in the school. You know, we've come to the table with our own values. You know, I'm still, when it comes time to the bond, I'm going to vote the way that I'm going to vote. But here on the committee, we need to come to the community's consensus, so that when the bond is proposed, it's what the community wants. It's not what the school district wants.
John?
And that's where I was going to go with the comment I was about to make before, was I think it's important for the community to have input, to ask the questions or provide the comments, for us or the school district to respond to those, because if they don't have that opportunity to be heard, then I don't think we'll get the support that we need. And so I think we need to have more informational sessions, gather the questions and comments, and then have more public informational sessions to address those for those people that bring up those comments. And I think that's how you're going to garner support for the bond.
I just want to say, let's be careful. We have heard what people have told us. I think some of you have said that. Money, location, safety. We know what people have said. I've had very few people say I know. I've listened to two of the biggest critics. I heard them. I was in that gymnasium. I went to him and spoke to him, and he told me what the reasons were. We're addressing those. I think we might complicate things a little bit by doing that. I understand the support that you might or might not get, or the other issues that might come up. Nothing wrong with getting that information. But I think we have a sense of what we've heard. Some of you didn't articulate it as much, but I think the issues are on the table. We need to pitch to the catcher, pitch to what, in fact, they said they want. Are we accommodating it? Where in this maze is this place going to be? What is it going to have? What will the cost be? I think you can sort it down to about 4 or 5 things, not a whole bunch of things to say what do you want. Because you might have a whole bunch of things they want. And then I told them what I wanted on the survey. I ain't voting for it now. I don't know. I would just be careful. I think we have gathered some information. Maybe we need to gather a little more. I don't know. But I'd just be a little careful.
So I'm going to try to wrap this up here and just suggest that the next meeting topics that you've identified would be trying to provide some process for justification for the decision if you feel you've made one. And maybe that's something to revisit next meeting. Kind of cost, how to keep it down, what would happen with state match dollars, decision making about whether to conduct a survey or not, and provide clarity out of this process for what is being bought by if the bond were passed. One of the things that you could continue to do between now and 2 weeks from now is to accept that community input, whether you're having them at your optometrist shop or at the feed store or at school or wherever you are, and bring back that information to the next meeting. Maybe that helps clarify if there's anything that would benefit from a survey at this point prior to a recommendation going or findings going from this committee back to the school board. And then these two pieces are more about, if you've made a decision for new, what are the things that you want to try to make sure are promoted in trying to write information about the bond.
Is there anything wrong with splitting into committees and having Molly and Doug on different committees and going over this anyway?
Yeah, but it's going to be a committee of two.
No.
Different committees.
I know. Going over these values and just discussing it between now and the next meeting? To find out if, I had to make a decision because I only had to fight off two of you and said yes. No, but just in fact to go over these values and get different opinions?
Well, it might be something that, if that's done, like you said, was your charts.
Yeah.
Maybe that, making a chart that as a committee or as a subcommittees, that's something you can put out so the voters can see, okay, this is what they thought about. This is why this site's better, this is why this building is better versus remodeling. So that, I think you have something there as far as.
Yeah, there's constituencies out there that want to know, well, why did they make the decision? We could let them know.
So, Katie, do you have a point on this?
Well, if we're going to continue to identify the values which help each of us come to the conclusion we came to, which I think is kind of where we are, it would probably help if we all came prepared to the next meeting with the values that influence us the most. So regardless of which way we lean, our values get heard. And then we can put them up as a group and see what similarities there are and, where the outliers are.
So,
Rather than having to start from scratch.
and so that's kind of an alternative proposal to having two different committees doing work between now and the next committee, or next meeting of the committee, would be to bring those kind of important factors for you, the interest that you were considering as you made kind of your analysis of which way to recommend. And that would be kind of a possibility for the next meeting, would be to start with that.
I was just thinking, I can make my own list, I probably can't make another meeting.
Between now and then,
Yeah.
Why can't you just go around the table and each person have 6 or 7 reasons, and there's gonna be a lot of repeat
Of course.
of why they
That's what
made
I'm
the
thinking.
decision this way. And probably if there's 15 of us, you're gonna maybe end up with 34 reasons, and that'll be part of our presentation to the public. But there's gonna be a lot of repeat as we go around.
I think you'll probably end up with 10 or fewer,
Yeah,
probably.
possibly. In the survey, I think we're such a diverse group. I don't see why we don't go ask 15 people. You usually don't have to ask. You're on there. You're going to get the survey of what's important or why they don't like it.
Yeah.
Also is a thought on the survey part.
So how about that then? How about for the next meeting, had a concern for trying to schedule something between now and 2 weeks from now, that people come with kind of having thought through what were maybe this 5 factors that kind of led you to your passion statement from tonight, and then we'll just start off with that as the first topic.
And what is our assumption as to where the building is going to be? Are we just going to say, somewhere on the Valley View site, or?
Yes.
Well, that's probably something that could go up here for further clarification. Is that, I mean, when you're saying when you present that to the public.
Well, when we're getting people's opinion, they're going to say, well, where is it going to be? Where is it going to be located?
I think at this
what
point.
What is the answer to that?
I think at this point you'd say on the campus site of the high school, Valley View Elementary, and the lands that the school district owns or adjacent to them, and we'll be trying to clarify that as we move forward.
On or near.
On or near.
Because one of the options is we had that corner between where Capitol turned into Fenning and wasn't school property, and then it was north of the extension of Third, it would all go through it. If they became available, there might be preferred sites over what's available currently. Okay, so that'll be the first thing on the agenda for next meeting. We'll also consider these. one of the things I did hear is, can there be consideration, if we were to recommend a new site, to not tear down the 1920s portion of the building? What would it take to be preserving that for potential future different use, or what does that look like? And that might be one of the questions. It sounded like a number of people were kind of wondering if that's a possibility. It's kind of a both-and option. I expect that there's significant cost related to trying to maintain seismic security of the building if it weren't torn down.
I don't think that's.
Isn't the primary concern the auditorium? Isn't that the main love of everybody? I mean, I don't think the third floor is anybody's worried about, not anybody.
Well, no,
That's
Kevin.
not the main concern. What I learned, I remember the 7th grade Spanish play in that auditorium. I mean, we have a value to it, but I'm not sure I have a value to the classroom on the 3rd floor I had from Mr. Margaret in science. I'm just saying it sounds more palatable if you don't say you want to save the whole thing versus if you said the auditorium or performing arts center, but then I wonder if that's included in the new building.
Well, maybe we can spend some time on that if people want to.
Okay.
Would be, are there options that could include maintaining, for the people who really want to preserve the space, is there an option if the middle school was
Right, I think part of that is looking at what the voters will do. And next time we can roundtable on that, because I think it's a real important part to the voters.
Can I pull a Sam? Sam, will you listen? What's the reason why the reason we're here is because they want to demolish this place. And there's been enough studies that point in that direction. That decision was pretty well clean. This building is probably going to come down whether it was modern or not.
So that's pretty subjective.
Is it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's leave that for the agenda for next meeting, because that opens up a whole can of worms.
That's not our committee.
That's another committee.
Hold on, as we close, Julie, any thoughts?
I was just curious what our deliverable is, where our next meeting, I think, is our last meeting before
July
our
15th.
June 15th
June 15th,
deadline.
yeah.
I'm just curious what our deliverable is that comes out of that, if that's something that needs to be addressed next time.
Well, the deliverable, I guess, would be the 3 topics that the school board clarified in the meeting was new or remodel, location, and the cost where the state match dollars go towards paying down the bond or be used for other things.
I'm just curious if this is draft.
Yeah.
You were going to write a paper and present the speech. Didn't you get that in the email? Oh, darn.
That happens to the newest member of the committee. So, but I think those 2 pieces are on there, yeah. Okay, so next, these, yeah. Sorry for the confusion. I passed along the agenda as we kind of decided last meeting, but somehow there was confusion about it getting out to people until today, so that will happen much quicker. Next meeting, 2 weeks from tonight. Well, I don't know if it's like 2 weeks, but the first Monday in June, first Tuesday in June at 6:30, right here. 3 weeks because of the.
No question about that.
Keeping that agenda for the next one. Oh, I have. I asked for some rest. They're talking about